Hey there, internet friends. Welcome back to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on is hopefully our audio stuff is fixed and we don't lose you this time around. Apologies to anybody who wanted our big epic 4.5 hour thoughts on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth last week, and had to kind of make do with a very quiet Cameron for his portions of it. But hopefully we've gotten that all sorted and situated, and we'll not run into that issue again today. Because today we're going to be doing another spoiler cast, talking about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. It's pretty much, we're sitting on it. We watched it last Sunday, so we've basically just been like sitting on it for a week because we'd obviously already done the Rebirth stuff. So yeah, we're gonna kind of share our thoughts on that. As always, we're gonna do kind of spoiler free impressions first, and then dive into the spoiler filled thoughts. I suppose for a timely sake, it would have made more sense if we'd gone and seen Godzilla versus Kong, or whatever the Godzilla Kong one is that just came out this weekend. But alas, we're just going to be a week behind. In particular, because I don't really care about the Godzilla Kong stuff, so I wouldn't have had much to really contribute to that. But if you do like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So Cam, spoiler-free thoughts first. What did you think of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire?
I loved it. I really was captivated by it. I feel like there is going to be people who are like, this film I think is going to be a little divisive for folks, and not in like a critical way, or not a critical way, like not in a controversial way. I don't think that this film will be like controversially
splitting. Ghostbusters 2016.
Yeah, it's not going to be splitting people based off of controversy. I just think this is a movie for Ghostbuster fans, definitively. Like, this is not. I don't think that this in itself is like going to be like a big appeal movie for non-Ghostbuster fans. But if you're a fan of the idea and concept of the franchise, and like the kind of the extended universe cartoons, like, this is definitely going to be up your alley. So,
yeah, while I enjoy Ghostbusters, I feel like I mean, obviously neither of us are on the level of like a Greg Miller kind of funny kind of fan level of Ghostbusters, but like I vaguely remember the cartoon kind of growing up. Like, I probably watched it, but like it's lost in like 6-year-old Trevor's mind, and that has not carried through to 39-year-old Trevor. Of the original ones, I always liked Ghostbusters 2 better, and maybe it's because that's the first one I really remember watching as a kid. But like, I liked the slime, and I liked the Statue of Liberty bits and stuff like that. But I mean, I would say I liked Afterlife more than both of the original Ghostbusters, because it was building on what had come before, but was also like not doing the thing that I think 2016 suffered from, of let's take a bunch of like funny comedians and just kind of give them a 2-hour time slot to crack jokes about ghosts. I liked that Afterlife was very much like, let's do a Goonies or an E.T. style thing with like this adventure of these kids in this little rural Oklahoma town kind of thing. And so this one, bringing them all back to New York, I think we talked about this kind of on the car ride home last week. I think I might enjoy like the Ghostbusters-iness of this one more, in that like it does a pretty good job of more evenly mixing kind of the old Ghostbusters with the new Ghostbusters and ideas and stuff like that, and building on what has come before. But I think I probably still liked the overall story and stuff of Afterlife more. So I think that's where it kind of falls in my overall ranking of everything. But I mean, the biggest things I think this movie suffers from are just too many people and trying to give all of them service, so nobody really gets enough service. There's a lot of and there's obviously a lot of like cut corners in terms of like the storytelling beats and stuff like that. Going back and like rewatching trailers and stuff, there seems to be a lot of cut content from the movie, like a lot of reshoots or a lot of rewrites or something, because they're just complete sequences where it's like, I think I can see where that turned into based on what's in the final product, but like this thing from these trailers is just nowhere to be found kind of moments.
I think there's a good chunk of this movie that's on the editing floor.
Yeah.
I don't know if it, like, I don't feel like there's not like a reshoot atmosphere to any of these scenes. But they definitely feel like there's like you said, from trailers and whatnot, there's definitely cut content that is going to be.
But overall, I still had a very fun time. I had a smile on my face throughout the movie. Even, it was largely, I turned my brain off and just kind of enjoyed along for the ride, which you have to do if you're going to enjoy a thing where ghosts are the central conceit, I think. I don't know how much I'll really think about this movie again, though, moving forward. Like, I don't think there are any like real giant standout moments. At least not for me, but it was still a fun enough time. And I'd be happy to throw this on and kind of have it on in the background or a rewatch or something like that. But yeah, just it was like it's a fine. I'd say it's like a 7 out of 10 kind of movie for me. Of like, it's good, nothing critical. Like, but going into it, having seen like and hadn't read, but just seeing like the IGN 4 out of 10, I was like,
yeah,
what? Like, did they miss the mark that much? And I definitely don't agree with that.
Not at all.
It's fun. It's fine. The main criticism of that seems to be like Ghostbusters doesn't know what it wants to be, and I'm like, that's so much of what like things are, and I'd say even there are aspects of this movie that are like that's the central theme of some of the characters' beats is they don't know what they want to be, or they're not ready to be who they are or something.
I think that person, like, I read their review. I think they completely missed the entire like the continuation of a coming of age theme that carried over from Afterlife to this one, where Afterlife was like a lot of closure at the very end. That was like very cathartic. Like the entire idea of like, she wasn't necessarily going home, but the mom going to like her dead dad's house and finding out that he was like, he still tried to be as much of a part of her life as he could while he was doing his sort of like vigilance. And now her taking up kind of this mantle and continuing it on. It's like, well, what does it mean for this family? Like, it's very much a family now.
Yeah.
What does it mean for them to be Ghostbusters? What does it mean for you to be like, you have teenagers doing this? And like, there's a whole lot of, and like everybody's story is like, we don't really know who we are. And the entire point of the movie is what they find what they are at the very end, which is a true family.
Yeah. Gary Gruberson's a lot like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be in this moment. Am I supposed to be the cool teacher? Am I supposed to be a stepdad? What's the vibe?
I'm technically like, we aren't like married, so it's not like there's like an official capacity to my role.
Yeah,
and it like that is a big part of like also where does this family dynamic fit? Finn Wolfhard's character, he's like it's that like I am not a boy, but I am not yet a man story of like, well, yeah, I will be the one to catch this ghost on my own. And it's one of the most notorious ghosts in New York City, Slimer, who is one of the only ghosts who knows how to escape the containment unit. And so, like,
sure, if we're going by like cartoon logic.
Cartoon logic, yeah. Like Slimer is is notorious. Like it was a difficult thing for the Ghostbusters to catch on their first one. And it's also like a kind of like legacy thing of like, oh, the first one Finn Wolfhard's character is doing on his own is Trevor's first one that he's doing is the first ghost of the Ghostbusters. Like, there is a sort of like continuation nod to his own coming of age thing and how he solves it.
Yeah. So I think that kind of serves as a good enough segue to dig into spoiler stuff. Like, ultimately, we both enjoyed it. Both had a good time with it.
I know I enjoyed it more than you, but like I'm also a bigger Ghostbusters fan than you.
Sure. If you haven't gone and seen it and you like Ghostbusters, go check it out and go form your own opinions on it and whatnot. I think I definitely don't. I think it warrants a lot of the criticisms it's getting in terms of like too many characters, and so there's too little time for everybody. And also, I think that while I liked the big bad in terms of like a threat. It's and also the it's not Gozer kind of ness of it. It is it's a one-dimensional thing, but I think they make up for it in other areas that we'll talk about kind of in spoiler territory.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was fun seeing Ghostbusters doing their Ghostbustery thing. Last chance to duck away if you don't want spoilers. And if you are ducking out, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week kind of thing, maybe. Diving into kind of full spoilers, you touching on Slimer, I kind of want to kind of go, I guess, in the realm of like, yeah, they definitely play on the nostalgia again with this one.
Yes.
We get obviously a lot of Slimer stuff. We get specifically a lot of like the library from the original Ghostbusters. Not only the library ghost kind of makes her return with Ray, and kind of they have another face off, but even like the library administrator kind of pops in as a cameo.
Yep, so good.
In a fun little like, okay, that's like for the deep cut super fans kind of thing. It's like I caught it. It was I got to imagine it was one of those like, I don't know that guy too well. I feel like I've probably seen him in a number of things. He's a character actor. But like we lingered on it enough that I was like, okay, he's probably got to be like a callback from the original. And so sure enough, yep, that's exactly what it was. As I touched on in the in kind of the spoiler free stuff, I really like how this still lets this movie be about the new family, but incorporates kind of the old Ghostbusters into the mix a bit more. Obviously you have Winston kind of bankrolling the whole thing, and he gets to kind of do his thing, like showing off how much money they can put into Ghostbusters stuff with the whole separate thing, even if it makes no sense that is happening for the first time in this movie, and they weren't like introduced to that branch of the Ghostbusters stuff beforehand, even though they've been in New York and busting ghosts for a couple years. I like that we get kind of the moment with Venkman doing his like psycho experimentation or psycho interrogation with Kumail Nanjiani's character, and I like Ray just kind of teaming up with the kids for a lot of this stuff, so he can kind of feel the thrill of the adventure again.
It's funny because Ray was always the most like the least mature of the original 4 Ghostbusters, and so him finding like the fact that he has like a kindred spirit with podcasts that they discovered, like shout out to them, like taking that little like tease / nod at the very end of Afterlife and turning it into like podcast is pretending that he's at space camp, but in reality he's doing a podcast.
Yeah, he's doing with Stance.
Yeah, doing a podcast and a video series with Ray, and just like the hammer says, sorry, the hammer gets the views.
Yeah.
Got me so good.
I think podcast is the one like...
Oh, he's criminally underused for sure.
I don't necessarily think he's underused. I think he's the one non-family carryover that makes sense in this. Whereas like Lucky also being here is like, all right, it feels like you were just trying too hard to bring the core cast from Oklahoma into New York.
I mean, I don't see
it's fine.
Yeah. They explain it well, but it's like, no, she's like doing an internship. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. Because like, yeah, she did have experience.
So she's doing an internship and a thing that the actual Ghostbusters, including Trevor, didn't know about. So it's like, how did she know about it, but they didn't? Is just another weird like aspect of the plot.
My pickup is like Winston picked her up and Ray picked podcast up as kind of like a, hey, you're you. This is you.
There's
you're
something
brand new
there, kid. I see it. I see it.
Yeah, I see something in you, kid. Yeah. Like, yeah, you got that. What is it?
You got some potential.
You got some.
You got
some
moxie.
Moxie. You got spunk. Spunk. You got spunk, kid.
Yeah, we've turned full Ed Asner from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. So yeah, while I appreciate that they're here and carrying over from the last movie,
yeah,
it also like it bleeds into the, okay, if you'd cut a couple of those characters, you'd have more time for all the characters that are in this movie. But we do also get the one new character that comes in and like just kind of fits their timing perfectly is the Patton Oswalt thing of like, okay, he's in here for one scene and just fun seeing Patton Oswalt get to nerd out about all this stuff, knowing what a nerd he is in his comedy and stuff like that.
And a great explanation about like, oh, we see kind of the tease of the ghost at the beginning of the movie, 1904, like the firehouse and everything. Like, there's great ties and teases to a lot of it, like, being like, yeah, no, remember, the Ghostbusters house is an old-ass firehouse, decommissioned firehouse. Like, there is like points to this, and the fact that it's like, yeah, and then but Patton Oswalt just like blatantly being like, yeah, they call themselves the Manhattan Adventure Society, bunch of rich, like,
bunch of rich
douchebags, doing the whole colonializing thing, like stealing artifacts and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, and you can kind of piece together like, oh, they stole the orb, they're messing with it. Nadim's grandmother was there to like.
Yeah, that's a weird aspect of it of like, okay, she was there and she was the fire master kind of like protecting things or whatever. But it's like thinking back to what happens in that scene, everybody else frozen, and she has, I guess, managed to reseal it in that moment.
That's kind of like the thing that I picked up. Is that what
we're supposed to expect? Understand is like, oh, it got out for a moment, froze everybody in the room, and then she immediately kind of brought it back because she's just sitting there like holding it until like the fire chief comes up and like grabs at it, and then she like opens her eyes, and it's like the jump scare moment that then going back and trying to piece together, well, what actually happened in that moment before the fire call. Yeah, it's weird.
I think it makes sense because it's like if she's like whipping around fire, they're going to be like, oh, there's a fire, so they call the firehouse, right? That was my interpretation of that.
Yeah, I guess even that I didn't get that that's what they were called for. I thought they were just called because there was a disturbance at the Manhattan Adventure Society. But I will say, like, all that said, like, that scene is worth it for me for the visual of phonograph playing with the crank going and the hand is still just like attached to it while the frozen guy is right there disconnected from it. I was like, oh, that's a cool visual.
That's a cool visual. The entire frozen room and the fact that it's like Sub-Zero frozen, like frozen over, and the way like people's bodies eventually like shatter and stuff. I'm like, that for me, like, yes, everything about that scene, like visually, like works for me on so many different levels, and also shows us, hey, this is scary.
Yeah.
Which is like they have firmly established, hey, the big bad in this film is scary.
A threat. Yeah.
Is a threat. He literally will freeze you to death, and then they like come up with like some like dumb nonsense later when they explain that you're literally frozen by fear, and it's like dumb. But here's the thing: we already know the impact and how scary it is.
Yeah. Well, that's the mythology that has passed down is the frozen by fear. I like that they also couple it with the science of like, no, this thing just like turns you to 0 degrees Kelvin, the point at which all matter stops. Like you just freeze to death.
Yeah. It has that like kind of like dumb occult thing that's like Ray's side of things, but also the scientific side. Yeah. And we get that firmly established in that first scene, and it's like, oh no, this is scary. And then when all of a sudden you remember from the trailers, like the ice shards like popping out of the ocean, and you're like, oh yeah, this is scary as hell.
Yeah, I mean, going to that, there is that like this weird thing of once we eventually get Garakas, the big bad of the film, like unleashed. He goes around, he kills a guy, he goes to Kumail's place, Nadim's old place, to get his horns back or whatever. And then he goes back out to sea and like drifts. It's like there's weirdness to that. It's like great for a visual of like, let's get that like it's hot here on the beach of New York kind of sequence, and everybody's sweating up a storm, and then suddenly a storm comes in and freezes everything. But it's also like, oh, They don't even commit to showing like death in that moment. It is just like everybody's running and scared and panicky and like and shards of ice kind of coming up, and we see it piercing through taxis and stuff like that. We see its effect on the environment, even if we own like the only person we see Garakas actually kill is like the fire master bong shop guy.
Well, I think the thing for me about that was it was the ice across this ocean part, like across the beach, was Garakas crossing from was it Queens or they were in like the Bronx or something, was like the Winston's facility.
I mean,
and then he crosses over into Manhattan.
Except we see him like I mean, they don't tell us where the fire master is. They don't tell us where Nadim's place is, but like we do see him at those places after he leaves the Winston's like
Institute,
facility,
yeah.
the aquarium kind of place. And then before that, the issue I would say with that is like, that's all visible from the shores of New York kind of thing. Like if he's crossing the bay from Queens, you can still see Queens. And this was very much like, no, he's just coming from the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, is kind of how it's framed, or how it's shot, at least. It's whatever. It's just like one of those other things of like, did you need to shoot it in this way that makes us question the logic of what's happening in this moment, versus just having like the storm kind of coming up just over the beach or something like that, not necessarily coming from out to sea or whatever, but it's whatever. The overall thing I want to say, like, Gracchus, I think, is a cool threat.
Very.
Even if he isn't like a character and doesn't have like a sharp personality that the Ghostbusters is really bouncing with, because I think this movie gives us that in the form of Melody.
Yeah, I think Melody is that more like like our actual connection to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we also get the impact of two things. One, how powerful Gracchus is, that he is so powerful that even though he shuts down kind of like the barriers on the other ghost like watching places, they still don't come out.
Yeah.
Until he tells them to. Like,
yeah.
He is scary enough and powerful enough that he commands other ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
And so like he gives the order to Melody. But it also sounds like his Melody's discussion about it is, it sounds like it's not just like, oh, I dominate you. It is also a level of like, hey, I can get you what you want kind of a thing. And I think they do a great job of Melody being kind of a reflection of that. But then we also see Gracchus possess Phoebe's ghost.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, he's extremely powerful, but also he's able to like convince people it's like there's some level and depth to this that we don't need to actually spend time in the film exploring, because we have it happen. We see it rather than them telling us that it happens.
Yeah.
Like, it really is more a matter of showing, not telling, or showing, not showing the scenes where this stuff happens. Like, we don't need the scene where Gracchus confronts Melody and gets her on his side. Mm-hmm. It happens off screen, but we understand what's happening because of all the kind of like hints, like the visual hints.
Because we get a shot of Melody walking down the street saying like, does it have to be her?
Yeah.
Telling the audience, okay, Melody's got something else going on. She's in league with the big bad. She's not to be trusted, even though our hero Phoebe doesn't know that's coming, kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's almost a little bit too much foreshadowing in that regard of like,
sure,
or like, yeah, too much giving a little bit too much away, like that I wish they'd held back a little bit, so that it could have been like a shock reveal for the audience as well as the character in that moment.
I think that part of the Ghostbusters as a franchise, the visual, like the kind of like thing about it is like they want the audience to be in on it. Because I'm thinking about like all the times like in Ghostbusters 2, like the focus on the slime, like the visual focuses that are done.
Sure.
I feel like that's part of the kind of storytelling of Ghostbusters movies. So I feel like it fits.
Like we the audience know Janosch is in league with the big bad, and that far sooner than the other characters do.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And the thing is like, it's not that our characters are dumb. It's like, no, we are, as the audience, have a lens to what's going on that they don't.
Yeah. We get a few shots given to us to let us piece that together.
And I feel like a big part of that also lets them retain like intelligence as characters, because it's unfair that we know these things because we are an audience versus rather than like, if I was Phoebe, I totally would have it's like, no, Phoebe would have had no idea. Like,
I mean, I think I still think it could have been done with Phoebe, especially because Phoebe's intellect can go out the window a little bit when she's doing silly things because she's, in young love or something for the first time with Melody, which is very much like the vibe they're laying down in this. And
it's sapphic as hell, and I
easily
love it.
like her arc with Melody and that kind of stuff is probably my favorite part of this movie as a whole. Of just like,
absolutely.
that's a cool vibe, especially the like tease of her going out and like playing chess, and that being such a visual from the first movie of like it being with Egon, and this moment of like when I don't know if you were in the same boat, but like when the body starts to materialize around the chess piece, I was like, are they gonna do Harold Ramis again?
That's what I thought. Yeah.
A, we saw him dissipate last time, so why? And B, you don't need to. Don't do that. And so when it wasn't him, I was like, okay, cool. Oh, this is interesting.
When I saw how feminine the hand was, I was like, okay. And then it like shows I was like, okay. I'm like, I wasn't expecting that. And I thought at first it was going to be like more of like oh yeah, you're like a friend. Of course, Phoebe's like first friend in New York is a ghost. And it's like, oh no, Egon Spengler's granddaughter, her first love is a ghost.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that first off, such great, like, there's plenty of ghost stories out there of like, a ghost, like romance and whatnot. The idea of like, you can't be together. A lot of times it leads to people talking
Quite
about
famously Ghost.
And oh yeah, no, when they have like a reverse ghost moment where like Phoebe's coming out of that and they're like, and you're just like there's like it's palpable, like there's tension, and you're like, okay. And then Melody just goes, I'm so sorry. And you're like, no, like it's gut wrenching. Cause you're like, oh no, I forgot what kind of movie we're in. I was so caught up in the young ghost love that I completely forgot that there's a like ancient pre-Babylonian,
pre-Sumerian,
pre-Sumerian, like demon,
evil demon
ghost who is like in that orb over there. I totally forgot about that because I bought and lost in this romance, and it's like, oh no.
Yeah. So I love their little bit. I love the like the setup that we get very early on with like the matchbook kind of thing, and
such good.
Like based on Phoebe's experience in the last movie, her being like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you have to like, do whatever you are meant to do before you can kind of pass on to the other side. Oh, what happens when what happens when you pass on? Well, it's really beautiful. Like you kind of dematerialize and your atoms become, one with the cosmos kind of thing. If quantum physics is to be expected. Oh, I always believe in quantum physics. Yeah. Or quantum mechanics or whatever. It's such a lovely little thing. And even in giving that like very technical thing, I'm remembering what I saw happen to my grandfather, who I'd never really met, kind of like thing. So yeah, I love their dynamic throughout. They had great chemistry between the two of them, and they're like, I love just like the little vibes that were like the awkward running into each other at the diner with podcast there, and Phoebe can't like, let him know what's going on. And then the kind of reunion there at the fire station. You want to come in? You want me to come into your ghost extermination place? Yeah, okay, sure.
So good.
Yeah. So that when we do get the like, I think the one beat that story is missing that might just be on the cutting room floor somewhere is another connective tissue between that is, because like Phoebe asks earlier on about like, oh, have you done like, have you tried like removing a ghost via like possession? Have you tried this on like a human subject? And that's supposed to be the thing that gives her the idea later to go and like, all right, I'll pull my own spirit out. But based on what she saw previously, the spirit comes out and then immediately gets sucked up. And we don't ever see like her turn that piece of the puzzle off, or she doesn't like make any mention to turning that. So it ends up being this weird like, okay, you're going to do this thing that we've kind of seen once, maybe twice. But in the other times we, the audience, have seen it, it's just a, extraction into ghost trap kind of situation. What is making you not immediately get pulled into the ghost trap kind of, and so the fact that they don't like tie that up loosely or like neatly is just another like, oh, that's it's a nitpicky thing, but it's still like it couldn't have been too hard to tie up that loose end for this moment. But yeah, we do get the like, the crushing like, I'm sorry, I'm doing this because I need to go. I need to see my family again. Like that desire for Melody is so overwhelming for her. Then of course it didn't work, and she doesn't get to see her family again. And it's not until she realizes that she can help, in the situation with Caracas, that like she gets her like peace.
Well, I feel like it was emphasized pretty heavily that she was the one that accidentally caused the fire that killed her family.
I mean, she specifically says like, I accidentally burned my tenement down or whatever.
Yeah. Like her whole thing about that. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. So she has like massive guilt about that.
Sure.
And so, yeah, Caracas uses that. And then, yeah, she has her own thing where it's like, yeah, Caracas breaks their deal. Because it turns out Caracas can't send her over.
Yeah. It's, I think of it less as like Caracas breaks the deal and like Caracas was exploiting her from the beginning. And
absolutely,
like there was never really a deal. He just kind of probably did the like, I'm letting you believe what you want to believe kind of thing.
Yeah, but you're so desperate you're willing to believe that this is a deal, but when in reality, I'm just telling you what I want.
Yeah. But I did love the other really new character that we get. So I will I guess like all the new characters we get of Melody, Nadine, the Patton Oswalt character, and Camille and Johnny's and Dean. Like all of them are fun characters. I think we just had too many other characters in the mix that it ends up everybody kind of feels a little short shrift. But like Camille, anytime he's on, is a lot of fun. And it was one of those things like I knew he was in it and I knew he stole the show based on like Greg's kind of like early review. Yeah. So when he pops up and is just like immediately pawning stuff off, I'm like, oh, how's he gonna like play into more of this movie then? And so I liked how his role expanded throughout of like he does go from just being this like burnout loser, younger brother in the family to embracing his destiny as the fire master beats.
Well, it also ties directly into like Trevor's whole thing where it's like Trevor's like what does it mean like when you're the older brother but you're not as good of a Ghostbuster as your younger sister. Mm-hmm. On just like every level of Ghostbusting, you're not it. And it's like how like difficult that can be, and him kind of finding his own way throughout it, and like him and Kumail, so Trevor and Nadeem like teaming up to help Nadeem learn his powers and everything, and
he does it though. Like he's doing the stuff with Slimer, he's doing the stuff with Lucky. It's Podcast and Ray that are doing the like the candle bit. Like they had like Trevor and Nadeem have the fun little bonding moment at
Nadeem's, that's where I'm confusing, I think.
Grandmother's house.
Yeah, that is kind of a thing.
Like, who's the real hero? The very successful older brother with a doctorate, or the unsuccessful brother who's just trying to go it his own way kind of thing, and the other one being like the second one, right? Yeah, like I love that little like we're both disappointments to our families kind of bonding moment.
Yeah, I think,
and also shout out to just all the sex dungeon jokes and stuff.
So good, good. We're in your grandma's sex dungeon.
Yeah. If this were a sex dungeon, would it have chains? Yeah. No. I heard it as soon as it came out of my mouth.
Yep.
An oldie but a goodie.
I guess what is Trevor's point in this movie then?
I mean, that is an issue.
That is a weakness of this movie for sure.
Because Trevor was already kind of an extraneous little bit in the first movie. Like in the first movie, he fixed up the car and he had the crush on the girl kind of thing, and gets swept up because it was so focused on the kids' adventure that he was part of that. This, he is just kind of an extra, so they give him a lot of stuff where he's just doing Slimer stuff on his own. So yeah, like it is that like, okay, they've given every character, a story over the course of the movie, some of them are way more important to the plot. The Trevor Slimer stuff does have the little payoff with the possessor ghost eating
Yes.
with Slimer eating the pizza.
That was so good. That was so funny. It came
as
out of
like-
nowhere. It's like,
and
oh
then-
yeah.
and Trevor being like, "Hey, I know that guy."
Yeah. I guess
almost
that-
having his own Thor moment of like, he's a friend from work.
Yeah. I guess that is kind of like the thing. It's like Trevor is a bit more of like the connective tissue to like other parts. It's the Slimer stuff with the possession ghost. There's the Institute stuff when he's like working with Lucky and working with Lucky doing things. I guess he is kind of like the Firehouse's like connective tissue to a lot of this other stuff, which is far more ancillary. But also,
I mean, like he's not like him working with Lucky that I'm thinking of at least is when everything's going down at the firehouse in the third act, the two of them going up to the roof, which based on the trailers and stuff seemed like it was more people up on the roof, and it seemed like maybe Lucky wasn't one of those because based on the trailers it seemed like Lucky maybe died in the first encounter with Baracus.
Yeah, that was kind of a thing that I felt was something I had expected to happen. Yeah,
that's like the trailers definitely led me to think that was going to be Lucky's fate. I appreciate that it's not, because ultimately, like, the heroes don't die in Ghostbusters. Like, nobody, none of the good characters, die. It's the same thing with like the Uncharted 4 conversation of like everybody thinking Nate or Sully are going to die at the end. It's like, that's not what that's the most notable death in any Uncharted was Jeff the cameraman, a character that meant nothing. So the plot could just move forward kind of thing. So like Uncharted was never about characters dying. It was pulpy action. Ghostbusters isn't about the main characters dying. It's pulpy action where the heroes are going to save the day. So like I appreciate they didn't go that route. So it just makes the seemingly appearance of like an earlier cut where maybe one of them did, and it probably tested badly with audiences because Ghostbusters don't die.
Yeah, it's also that, but it's also like, oh, so like the black girl.
Yeah, there's definitely that issue.
Yeah, like it's like that's problematic on its own end of things.
Yeah. So that's the only other, like, Trevor's doing the Slimer stuff, and then Trevor's up there with her. Everything, because like even like them going to the ghost kind of headquarters and science lab at the start is everybody in the family. Like everybody goes over there with it when Winston's like, oh yeah, like your containment's full, so let me show you what we're cooking up over on the other side of the bay. For the first time, even though you've been doing this work for 2 years. The one new character that I feel like he's fine for what he's in, and you liked him maybe more than I did, was the like Lars, the
Lars
scientist over
Pinfield.
there.
Yeah, Dr. Lars Pinfield. He's the shoot, what do they call it? He's the
parabotanist.
Yeah, parabiological scientist.
Sure. Yeah. He's there to be like a new generation of exposition stuff. But it was like he
very much has the big, how do I put it? He has those big Egon vibes of I'm a scientist.
Yeah.
That I feel like is Phoebe as our main character doesn't necessarily have those like deadpan.
He also serves the purpose of somebody needed to know the science that they've been working on for the last few years. Like that couldn't have just been Lucky. Oh yeah, I'm here on an internship and this is what we've been doing. Like it had to be a character in Winston's kind of grouping that has been doing this for a while for the purposes of this plot, but he just didn't have a ton to do. And or like the stakes they potentially set up with him of like his hand freezing while dealing with it, like the fact that he's like fine after that and like, oh, he's got it in a sling or something, but he's mostly fine. I was like, oh, if he had like lost his hand in that moment, okay, yeah, here are the stakes. Yeah. Again, that's not necessarily what Ghostbusters is trying to do, but it just isn't. But they tiptoe to that line and then like feel like instead of feeling like they're tiptoeing right up to the line, it feels like they're tiptoeing up to the line and then taking a step or two back and being like, no, never mind. But yeah, like he's the one that I felt like of the new kind of crew of people just didn't really do much for me. And I like, not that he couldn't, and the moments he does have are fine and funny. But like him popping up at the ghost, at the the fire station at the end, and having that like encounter with like the one ghost we'd seen earlier, and having that like, oh, I thought you were one of the big spooky ones, but you're just like the little small one that does the exact same like spitter beat from Jurassic Park that we'd already seen this character do. Like, I was like, oh, did they just kill that guy off screen?
Yeah.
Because we don't see him throughout the rest of the sequence until the end, where he comes out and he's fine. He's like covered in slime or whatever, but he's fine. It's like, okay, so what was the point of him being there apart from giving everybody the new proton packs? All right.
His point was to give people the new proton packs, and people want to know where he was. He had gotten slimed by the little like potato ghost.
Yeah. On the ending, that's another kind of issue, I think, of the like maybe just the editing issues of the play or of the movie of Lucky, because Lucky survives in this version, and is telling people, hey, the packs didn't do anything, like he just froze the beam. The fact that she's saying that to everybody and they just kind of disregard it, or as if they don't hear it, and everybody just shoots the beam anyway, except for Phoebe, who does very quickly throw some brass into her mix.
I think that would have been a better point for like Trevor and Phoebe working together to get the brass on her containment, like on her unit.
Yeah.
Because he is that kind of like more hands-on mechanical person. As kind of emphasized by like, he is sort of like the like more mechanical engineer side of things than Phoebe being more of like the theoretical side of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like establish an afterlife. And then I thought would have been like a good tie-in over here is if that had happened as well. Like what do we do? And he goes, a brass, and they do whatever they need to do to melt it down, get it coated on there, and then slotted it back in and ready to go.
Yeah. There is also that weird, like, for those that aren't intimately familiar with the firehouse and know that it has multiple brass poles, we see very clearly a shot of like cutting a brass pole, and then like the very next scene is somebody riding down the brass pole and being like, wait,
there's two poles though.
I understand this.
But both are intact actually.
They're not shown discreetly enough that like we understand that like, oh, one of them is being cut, but it's not this one kind of thing. So it just ends up being like another weird
continuity thing.
It feels like a flawed continuity beat, just because of like how quickly that's all happening together. But it's whatever. That said, I did like the possessor ghost kind of grabbing whoever's pack and going to shoot it at Trevor, and that's when Kumail's finally gets a mastery of his powers, and his powers work on the proton pack. It's also a great moment for Gary, because Gary like steps in to take the hit basically.
Yep.
And be like the dad character, because he's, as we touched on, he's been having that like, what is my role here, like. In any of the like showdowns with Walter Peck, the mayor, gone from EPA to mayor in 40 years. Like,
I mean, that's a quite a big comeback considering he was found responsible for the environmental disaster that was the Ghostbusters 1.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I mean, the Paul Ruddness of this movie is fun.
It's good.
He's the everyman, but he's also the like everyman, like winking at the fourth wall of like, who are you gonna call? Boston makes me feel good, and just saying all of the lines, but in the Paul Rudd charming way, kind of thing.
Well, it's also like they make very clear that like, oh no, those commercials and stuff did happen. The music video
the music
did happen.
video was a real thing in this universe.
Yeah,
which again goes to like I talked about this when we were leaving the last time. Like that seems like a little bit of a retcon, because from the last one it was very much like, oh, like the Ghostbusters were this like niche, completely forgettable thing. So much so that like, walking out of the afterlife, you're like, did Ghostbusters 2 happen in this universe? Because it seems like the Statue of Liberty, walking across New York would have left an impact, but they very specifically never mention it in Afterlife. So the fact that
they bring it up here,
they do, they canonize it here, is very much like, okay, the world seems to remember the Ghostbusters way more than they did in the last movie.
Well, I think part of it was like the world remembers Ghostbusters as part of like a thing in the 80s, but in the middle of Oklahoma, also like I think like it's also like this is the world where I think things fall off, and maybe like I don't know. I do feel like there is like they go too far into it being well known.
Yeah,
but I also don't think it's that much of a leap forward as much. But I think it's fine. I found that also that was more to tease and flirt with his girlfriend, their mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, all of that kind of like winkingness and charmingness always went into the, hey, can we like Carrie Coon as Callie Spangler does a great job of basically being like, I'm trying to just be like a good, responsible parent, but at the same time, like carry on my father's legacy.
Yeah.
And like make like, and really follow through with her character choices and decisions at the end of Afterlife. And Paul Rudd being there is like, hey, can we have a discussion? Because I don't know what I'm supposed to be in this moment.
Yeah.
And they have like very real, and it never feels like over dramatized. It feels like, oh no, this is the conversation that two real adults would have about this very complicated situation.
Yeah. I'll also throw a little bit of shade at that, like very contrived, like Phoebe can't be a Ghostbuster because she's only 15. It's like, there are plenty of people who start working at 15, especially in when Midwestern states are like rolling back child labor laws and letting people work in factories starting at 12 and shit. Like, yeah, I get New York is quote unquote more woke or blah 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 bullshit, but like no, like New York would be perfectly fine with
we have plenty of people working at 15.
Yeah,
yeah. I think the problem is like, oh, she's 15. Like,
It feels like it needed to not just be tied to her age. It feels like she needed to like fail in a big way that got her like benched, but she couldn't stand being benched or something like that. For it to just be like, hey, you're too young.
Well,
is just not realistic to
I don't know. When the mayor says, I'm going to shut you down for endangering a minor, like you can work at 15 or 16, but there's like legal, like you said, they're doing role.
That's fair.
Yeah, you can't work like in most places. You can't work. Jobs, you can't work in a mine at 15.
I mean,
in some states they are, but that's the problem that's going on in those states. Like
if it had been more tied to, there's this law in the books that a 15-year-old can't have a particle accelerator strapped to their back. Sure, go like that far with it and like make it a joke instead of playing it off as like, you're 15, you can't work, because it just kind of
I never felt it was that so much as it's because they do point out, he goes, when they're like, well, it's perfectly safe, and then it's like, well,
I mean, I did like the comparison, like we don't let 15-year-olds be our policemen and our and our firefighters and stuff like that. Like there was too much like focus on her age for me that like it ended up being like just a distracting thing of like
that was kind of the thing.
Plenty of people that work.
I think the whole part of it was in the house with the family.
Mm-hmm.
It was about her age and not the fact that this is an extremely dangerous thing you can't be doing.
Exactly. That's the other thing is like I remember working in my family business like at 12 or whatever, and I think you probably worked at your family thing well before.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You should have been working, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just what like
small family-run businesses are run off of child labor. The child labor specifically of the owners, though.
On the flip side, it did make for a nice contrast between like Trevor constantly being like, "I'm 18, I'm not talking about you. I don't care about you. Shut up," or him being like, "Hey man, mom, there's something goopy, dripping. Well, you're 18, right? Deal with it." And then he sticks his like finger in it. It's like, nobody would do that. What is this? What? Gross. But yeah.
Sorry, Trevor. You at 18 wouldn't have done that. Me at 18 definitely would have done that.
You would have stuck your finger in a goopy, slimy hole in the ceiling?
Trevor, it may out of the ceiling. I did not have that experience, but I poked my fingers into plenty of goopy holes.
I do not believe you. Especially in the like, you work in the ghost world kind of thing. Like I
Sure.
and especially given recent events of like what you will and will not react to and be startled by and stuff. I'm like, no, I think you would very much be like, no, goopy, no, boo. But yes, it's still like it leads to some fun moments and whatnot, as unrealistic as those fun moments may be. Any other highlights or even lowlights that you want to call it? I guess shout out to the original crew kind of like coming back and having that moment at the firehouse and Bankman coming in and
great supporting character roles for them.
And Janine, suiting up and all that stuff. Like nice little moments, even if again, if the original Ghostbusters weren't in this movie, the only one I think I would really miss would be like Ray and his stuff at the library with the kids. Especially his stuff with Winston, I guess, of like, you should be enjoying retirement, golden years kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, okay, that little bit, fine. But at what point do they stop bringing back these old characters for the nostalgia hit so that they can just kind of let the new characters do the thing?
Yeah. Well, I think
because it is very much like they still show up and they're very clearly just there for a couple days of shooting. And how much are they like, the amount of screen time we have to devote to them is taking away screen time from other stories that could have been fleshed out a little bit more.
Another thing too, though, I felt like every time that they were on the scene, there's only a few moments or scenes where they're not being like mentors, and it is. But I felt like that scene also was a massive callback to the classic scene where it's Ray and Winston smoking after busting a ghost in the car, like in the hearse, on their way back to the firehouse, and they're talking about like end of days, and they're quoting the Bible. And they it's very much like a working man, like two working men in a car kind of scene. It does pull from Ray and Winston had these scenes in the original movie while Venkman was trying to like woo their client and Spangler was trying to do science in like their lab. They were kind of like the guys going out and doing a lot of these like minor kind of montagey busting calls. Mm-hmm. And so them exhausted, smoking, driving back from a job, and they kind of talk over like the Dead Rising sort of thing.
And shout out to the payoff of Ray not smoking anymore. Yeah. Sorry, I quit in the 90s. Proud of you then, proud of you now.
So good.
Kumail doesn't have the fire. He needs to be the fire master.
Yep.
Because he used all the lighter fluid on
practice.
Nice. All right, cute.
Yeah.
It like as I said when we left, it was like realizing about 15 to 30 seconds before the movie did it that the match from Melody was going to come into play for that moment.
See, I didn't, and like we mentioned in the car ride back home, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
And so when it happened, it was like immediately like a callback to her at the beginning when she's introduced with the matches and everything. And it's like, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's such a good thing. Yeah.
Oh, everything's coming full circle. Yeah. They finally beat Baracus. I keep saying Baracus just because Baraka from Mortal Kombat.
Yep. Shout out though, I did want to say Gracchus's horns. Mm-hmm. So cool when he puts them in.
Yeah, he slots them in and they just kind of extend out. Also, shout out to the little animated sequence we get as Patton Oswalt is doing the exposition dump. Shout out to, I mean, again, just like Patton shows up for a couple scenes, but is like just good throughout. Like, oh, I'm one of 5 people that would understand this language, which must mean you were sent here by so and so. And podcast being like, that guy's dead. No, he's not dead. No, what the douche nozzle is wrong with you?
Yeah, what the hell's wrong with you, kid?
He very specifically doesn't say like what the hell or what the shit or something. What the stuff is wrong with you? Like he says a weird like substitution curse word. And I'm like, all right. I mean, that definitely keeps it PG or PG-13, but
that was awesome.
So like their whole stuff was great. We already touched on like his great line of like, a bunch of douchebags calling themselves the Manhattan Adventure Society, doing a whole bunch of colonialist stuff,
stealing artifacts.
The fire master, doing this stuff. great no notes. His little commentary on the story is just
Yep.
wonderful Patton Oswalt fun. Like the same kind of Patton Oswalt fun that you get if you are the kind of Patton Oswalt nerd that like watched his unedited rant from
Parks and
Rec all those years ago. Is just like great. Love it.
Yep.
And also the payoff to, okay, the possessor ghost takes the wax cylinder, which you think, okay, that's going to be how they open the orb or whatever, but no, the wax cylinder breaks. So the possessor ghost like jumps in the garbage bag, like runs out kind of thing.
So good. And then it ends up in the lion.
The kids go out first. They see a couple bags, but it's not there. Then the old guys come out and they're like, oh, it could be anywhere. Oh yeah, it's right there. Like just like fun little comedy beat there. But yes, the possessor ghost has jumped into the lion and we get that little moment that then leads to Phoebe pulling off. So yeah, like, Patton Oswalt shows up for 5-10 minutes of this movie, but it's fun.
I just think it was like, and if you think about it, like a lot of, if outside of Ray and
it's definitely the kind of thing like in another movie they could have easily just given all that stuff to Ray. He found a book in his occult shop that like details all this. I like that they don't have to hang the hat on Ray every time, so they have like they build out this universe a little bit more to be like, hey, yeah, here's another nerdy science guy. He's not super in the ghost scene, but he believes in whatever the folklore tells you kind of stuff.
I think that for me it's like Zedmore, like Winston and Ray being like easily could have had less scenes. But I still liked all the scenes that they had for me.
Yeah. I think like for me ultimately, and I think part of this is just like, Bill Murray's never been like my humor. Like I enjoy him occasionally here and there. But like him, the long moment we get of like the door open while everybody's in the firehouse and creeping and freaked out. And then he walks in, it's like, we already know it's going to be him. We've seen the trailer.
Yeah.
And he was also earlier in the movie. So of course it's going to be him showing up. So like that moment didn't really do anything for me. I guess like the bit of like him going over, knocking the fuse box and pulling out some whiskey and stuff. But like he has, I think, a beat or two too many in there. Though I will say I love in the multiple planes of action at the end of like all the old Ghostbusters going down to the trap, and Ray being like, "Do you know what this means?" and him just being like, "Pretend we don't." We trust you. Just do it, Ray.
Yeah,
like he has the good moments that cut through the bullshit there.
Which is like, it goes back to that classic, like if a god tells you, if somebody asks you if you're a god, say yes. Mm-hmm. Like it goes back to that kind of like Venkman vibe.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like he was in it too much. I felt like all of that was fine.
He's not in it too much. It's just, it's you could have cut like 30 seconds from his stuff of like, this is just a beat that goes on too long or a joke that's one too many.
I didn't find that. I just like, I don't think like it's necessary to cut a 30-second out of like a 3-minute total part.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that would have like taken away or given more to it or anything like that. I think the problem with this movie is, one, it's like this movie is less than 2 hours long, which I think helps it in a lot of ways because there's like some brevity to it. But I also feel like, it is not like, it's not significantly shorter. It's not 90 minutes. But it's like, it's only like, I think if I remember correctly, I was reading it. I have it pulled up here.
It's an hour 55.
Yeah, it's hour and 15. Hour and 15 minutes.
No, hour 55.
Sure.
An hour and 15 would be 75 minutes. It is.
Oh, sorry, 115 minutes, not an hour and 15 minutes. Sorry.
That's an hour 55.
Yeah, hour 55. You are correct, sir.
Yeah.
I feel like
the problem is that's an hour and 55 minutes split among like 15 characters
and plot points
/ supporting characters. Yeah.
It's a lot to use. It's a very big ensemble cast, and also like it's not a like Ghostbusters is not inherently a gripping it's a summer romp. It's a summer adventure flick series. And I feel like expecting more than like it will resonate with certain people deeply and become a very big fixture of their personalities, a la Hip Hop Albatross, Greg Miller, like the other, like there are people who love Ghostbusters.
The Arizona Ghostbusters that did the like, hey, thanks for coming to Majestic, thing beforehand. and replicated the ad of like, who are you gonna call? Nobody.
Yeah. Yeah. Their whole thing with that, like there are people who love that and they're that deep into it. This is not a like the wideness of the cultural phenomena of Ghostbusters is that people just generally like Ghostbusters.
Mm-hmm.
This movie is not a 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
I would call it for me, this is like an 8 out of 10. I feel like there's a lot of things that could have been improved upon or maybe workshopped a bit better. But if you're asking me, hey, what are you expecting out of a 4th Ghostbusters movie?
Mm-hmm.
This is it.
Technically 5th.
5th.
But yes, 4th in this canon.
Yeah. Like, yeah, no, this is it.
They're gonna pretend 2016 never happened till the day they die. Although 2016 made more in its opening weekend than this one did, than Afterlife did. This made about as much as Afterlife did. So I was like, well, both of them did good. And we'll see, what the legs on this one end up being, but it is like, Ghostbusters is never going to be save the first one that ran for the whole summer kind of thing. It's never going to be in the world of superhero movies. While this is very much a superhero movie for some of these characters, a la Kumail, it's never going to make that level of money. Because it's just not being done on that scale. But they're also made on a significantly smaller budget, so they at least have that going in their favor. So they'll probably make some money theatrically, and then they're going to make a ton of money in merchandising stuff, as they always do.
I just looked it up. The budget for this movie was $100 million.
It was like $100 million,
yeah. For how much special effects are in this movie, that is a criminally small amount of money. And the box office that it made is $108.5 million. Yeah. So everything it has post opening box office, post all of that, merchandise, DVD sales, all the stuff that they like really make money off Ghostbusters with.
So they're also Sony, so they also will have the benefit of licensing it out to Netflix and stuff like that, as opposed to everybody else that just kind of has to put it on their own service and doesn't actually get a bunch of extra revenue from that. So the movie is definitely going to make its money back. But yeah, it's not the juggernaut that some franchises can be or something like that. It hasn't done the thing that John Wick has surprisingly done of like every movie makes more money than the previous one did. So shout out to that series, but it's still like it's hanging on there. It's serving its audience. It's doing the thing for what it needs to do.
Ghostbusters is ghostbusting, and like that's what it's always been about. That's what it's always done. Like this is, I feel like if you think, wow, I feel like Ghostbusters should be a bigger thing than it is. Either you love Ghostbusters or you know somebody who really loves Ghostbusters.
It's also a very specifically like domestic market thing.
Yeah.
Like it never does well overseas.
No, never.
Ghostbusters is, and probably just because it's so ingrained with like New York and those and the comedians from the 80s movies, or obviously the last one being very like rural America.
Yeah, I was about to say it's super Americana.
Yeah.
In itself.
Yeah.
Like whether it's super New York, super 80s for the first two films, Afterlife being very rural.
There's also the the cultural norms of like other countries have very different relationships with ghosts compared to America's fascination with it.
Yeah.
The reason like horror movies do better here than overseas and stuff like that. It's the same kind of vibes. But yeah, still overall fun movie. We had a good time with it. So shout out to Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire. Do you hope they do another movie, or do you hope they do? I've seen like reports of like, they're thinking they'll do like another animated series on something.
I'll put it out this way. I'm cool if they make another one. If they don't, I understand, and I'm good with what I've gotten. I feel exactly the way I do after Afterlife. Like, I could go for another one. If they decide not to, I respect it and understand, and that's cool. Mm-hmm. That is very much where I'm at. I do not, I have never craved a Ghostbusters movie. That being said, it'd be cool if we got another one. Yeah. Or if they want to do an animated series with kind of like the new Ghostbusters, if they got all the voice cast together for it, that'd be sick. Sure. I'm down with that. Whatever they decide to go for, however they decide to go forward with it, I think is cool, and I'd be down for it. But overall, it is what it is.
Yeah. I'm kind of in the same. I especially again, it's Sony. They clearly don't know an idea that's bad enough that will stop them from making freaking Madam Web or Morbius or the Craven the Hunter thing. So like, I think somebody at Sony is going to be like, hey, it breaks even compared to a lot of these movies that are just losing us money. So yeah, let's make another one. Let's finish the trilogy or whatever, and then maybe we can do an animated thing from there. I shout out to our friend Greg's pitch of like, hey, here's my pitch for the movie. Let's set it in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Let's go.
It's a Ghostbusters franchise branch that is mostly out there just serving birthday parties and telling parents that there aren't really ghosts. It's set in between a Great Clips and a Domino's, there's literally that kind of location in a strip mall right down that street from us.
Yep, 100%.
Next to the Safeway. When I saw him post that, I was like, where I used to live, the Fry's complex that I used to go to had a Supercuts and a Pizza Hut in it, because that was where I would go and get my hair cut. So I was like, I originally did like a reply to him of like, hey, will you swap these out for the deal? We can put it here. But then when I was shopping on Friday, I was like, oh my God, no, there is a Great Clips and literally a Domino's right there. Yep. Here's the perfect location for the pitch that Greg is making of like, the much more singular poltergeist / horror movie in the Ghostbusters universe. I don't think they would do that because I think they are locked into kind of this core cast. I do think that, and I think Jason Reitman would be amenable to the idea of like, okay, yeah, let's take this crew out of New York and okay, there's a ghost call that they get from upstate New York or something outside of the city that is a much more self-contained thing. They can't call for, they can't bring in the old Ghostbusters because they're all, down.
They're geriatric down in New York
admittedly,
City.
that didn't stop them from going to Oklahoma, but I think it would be a little bit more. It would effectively be the back to basics kind of vibe that the last movie of Afterlife had, just without the like extra nostalgia pulls of Gozer and the original cast and all that stuff. So.
I don't know. Like here's my deal though. Like, why don't you do like cheaper, like $20 million like short films of like Ghostbusters like that around different areas?
Sure.
Take Greg's idea, put $20 million behind it, grab like.
The realities are because that's not how the Hollywood model works.
Absolutely not. But, absolutely not. Well, I thought we were just like, pitching ideas out here. I think here's the thing: Ghostbusters can always basically do whatever it wants, unless it wants to like remake the first movie like poorly, with 2016 Ghostbusters. But other than that, like, yeah,
even like 2016 gets a lot of shit. 2016 is fine. 2016 is. 2016 is the same level of humor and like wit for me as somebody who doesn't have a desperate affinity for 1984. Like I look at 2016 and 1984 as pretty much the same level of quality. Like they're both fine, whatever. It's more about the comedians set in this and the comedians doing funny things. And I like a lot of the comedians in 2016, and especially like the addition they have there of like the Chris Hemsworth character is just a ton of fun and silly, because Chris Hemsworth in comedic roles is a lot of fun for me. So I like 2016 fine. I remember people being like, oh my God, they're making queef jokes, blah blah blah. I'm like, okay,
I was bothered.
Ray Stantz gets a ghost blowjob in the first movie. Like, shut up, it's the same humor. You're just like showing your misogyny when the queef joke offends you.
That doesn't bother me.
I'm not saying you. I'm saying the like you angry,
I'm not saying
angry internet.
I'm not responding to you. I'm putting out there. I'm not one of those people that had a problem with queef jokes or hated it because it was women. It was just like it just didn't hit for me. Mm-hmm. So like that's my thing. I just want to put out there. I am not one of those internet neckbeards who's just like upset that it was women. I was really hoping I would like it a lot more than I did. I just really did not care for it. It felt very like a lot of things also too is like I felt like two of the characters were essentially the same character. Like there was not enough of like the things that made half the ghost, like the difference between Ray And Spangler is like, my hobby is sorting through different collections and classifications of fungus.
Mm-hmm.
And Ray is like excited and jovial and like a kid. And I felt like they smashed those two characters together and then gave us two of those characters.
Yeah, Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy are like, well, I would say like Kate McKinnon is like the Spengler character of that one, and I think she's a lot of fun. For me, it's very much like, well, Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig, my mileage with them varies drastically, and I typically don't like either of them in the doses that we get them in, and that was one of those cases where it's like they're fine, they're doing their thing a lot, which wears on me pretty thin, but like there was enough other things in that movie that I enjoyed.
For me, it was, I just didn't feel like I did not care for the performance of either of those two actresses who I normally do like in everything. I am I'm a big believer in Melissa McCarthy, aka like, you know, loved her as Suki in Gilmore Girls, will love her forever.
She's really good in Ursula as in the Little Mermaid.
I gotta watch it, man. I do. Like, it's on my list of things to get to.
She's a lot of fun. I mean, she's largely doing the Ursula from the animated version, but like she does it very, very well.
Which I had no doubt that she would.
Yeah.
And then I do enjoy Kristen Wiig, but I enjoy Bridesmaids Kristen Wiig. I enjoy a very like I feel Kristen Wiig is able to be funny and ridiculous, but also be very like easy to connect with. And I did not feel that from her character in Ghostbusters. Mm-hmm. I felt that was the case for both Melissa McCarthy. Like, it felt like they're both trying to play the same, like they both auditioned for the same character and then just played the same character. And I just never felt like they were too distinct from each other. And I felt like it was like, I felt like both brands of these women's comedy, and it never came across throughout the film. And they are completely overshadowed by Chris Hemsworth and Jones. I'm trying to remember.
Leslie Jones.
Leslie Jones. Like, I think Leslie Jones and Chris Hemsworth are so uproariously funny and over the top that they do such a great job of that. And the other three, unfortunately, get kind of like their humor never really comes across well.
Yeah. Anyway, there we get
weird. You guys got a bonus.
You get a little Coda bonus review on 2016's Ghostbusters, which I don't think either of us have seen in 8 years.
Probably not. No, not since it came out. Yeah.
But yeah. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of That Nerdy Site Show. Thank you for joining us. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a plug to there, Cam?
Yeah, I want to give a massive plug over to That D Plus Show. We just did a D Plus show on X-Men 97, the first 3 episodes of the return of that animated series. We had a great time discussing it, kind of talking about like our connection to the old X-Men cartoons. And it's a whole lot of fun. Go check that out.
Yeah. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter. I will give a shout out to that D Plus show as well as my ongoing Let's Plays for Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. We are diving into chapter 9, I think, this week. It's weird because I spent this weekend uploading or like editing and uploading all of the rest of the episodes. And we are going to, starting this week, we're going to kind of move into Tuesday, Thursday, and bonus Saturday and Sunday episodes, just so we can kind of wrap up this series before too much longer, since the game's been out for a few months. So that's the last episode of that is scheduled to drop on April 20th. So stay tuned for that and all those episodes to come. Definitely some fun ones as the latter half of that game dives into the Yakuza Like a Dragon wildness of, hey, yeah, maybe we should fight a giant squid. Sure, why not? Let's fight a big old crane. Yep, of course. Why wouldn't you do that? Of course, that makes sense. So yeah, stay tuned for all that. youtube.com/thatnerdysite, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and for the next couple weeks, Saturdays and Sundays as well. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, ring notification bells, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other. And who are you going to call, Cameron?
Ghostbusters!
I really hope you didn't peak the mic with that.
It didn't peak, but it did get pretty high up there.
Yeah.